A warm welcome to the session on net neutrality, a perspective view. I am Dr. Manoranjan Pira, going to highlight the major points of net neutrality. A great debate, great discussion and discourse is happening around all the world about the net neutrality. So, as a common man, we like to know what it means and what its relevance to us. The entire discussion is based on internet and interconnection of global networks. It is an interconnection of metropolitan area networks, wide area networks and huge numerous networks of the world. Internet is built around the idea of openness. It allows people to connect and exchange information freely. If the information or service is not illegal, that means internet is built around the idea of openness. It allows the people to connect and exchange information freely if the information or service is not illegal. Much of this is because of the idea of net neutrality. If you like the current state of the internet, you should know about net neutrality. Many web users are aware of it. But if you are not, don't worry. Let us understand the basic concept of net neutrality. Let us start with what is this net neutrality talks about, what it means and what its relevance. Let me let me explain it with respect to the telephone networks so that everybody can be able to easily understand what is this net neutrality. Net neutrality is an idea derived from how a telephone line worked since the beginning of the 20th century. In case of a telephone line, you can dial any number and connect to it. It doesn't matter if you're calling from operator A to operator B. It doesn't matter if you're calling a restaurant or a drug dealer. The operators neither block the access nor deliberately delay connection to a particular number unless forced by the law. Most of the countries have rules that ask telecom operators to provide an unfiltered and unrestricted phone service. When the internet started to take off in 1980s and 1990s, especially 1990s in India, there were no specific rules that asked that internet service provider, shortly called ISP, should follow the same principle. But mostly because telecom operators were also ISPs, they adhered to the same principle. This principle is known as net neutrality. An ISP doesn't control the traffic that passes its server. When a web user connects to a website or a web service, he or she gets the same speed. Data rate for YouTube videos and Facebook photos is theoretically same. Users can access any legal website or web service without any interference from an ISP. Some countries have rules that enforce net neutrality, but most don't. Instead, the principle is followed because that is how it has always been. It is more of a norm than a law. Now, to put all the things together, let us define it. What is this net neutrality? Net neutrality, also called as network neutrality, internet neutrality, or net equality, is the principle that internet service providers and governments should treat all data on the internet equally, not discriminating or charging differentially by user, content, site, platform, application, type of attached equipment, or mode of communication. Net neutrality has made the internet an unrivaled space for free speech, civic participation, innovation, and opportunity. Net neutrality prohibits online discrimination and gives any individual, organization, or company the same chance to share their ideas and find an audience. So, you will be wondering that is how net neutrality shaped the internet. The net neutrality has shaped the internet in two fundamental ways. One, web users are free to connect to whatever website or service they want. ISPs, that is Internet Service Provider, do not bother with what kind of content is flowing from their server. This has allowed the internet to grow into a truly global network and has allowed people to freely express themselves. For example, you can criticize your internet service provider, maybe Airtel or maybe any service providers, on a blog post, and the ISP, that is Internet Service Provider, will not restrict access to that post for other subscribers, even though the post may harm its business. But more importantly, net neutrality has enabled a level playing field on the internet. To start a website, you don't need a lot of money or connections. Just host your website and you are good to go. If your service is good, it will find favor with web users. Unlike the cable TV, where you have to forge alliances with cable connection providers to make sure that your channel reaches viewers on internet. You don't have to talk to ISPs to put your website online. This has led to the creation of Google, Facebook, Twitter, and countless other services. All of these services had very humble beginnings. If you go through their cases, they started as a basic websites with modest resources, but they succeeded because net neutrality allowed web users to access these websites in an easy and unhindered way. So you may think now, what will happen if there is no net neutrality? Let us visualize so that we can understand the principle in a better way. If there is no net neutrality, ISPs, that is Internet Service Providers, will have the power and inclination to shape internet traffic so that they can derive extra benefit from it. For example, several ISPs believe that they should be allowed to charge companies for service like YouTube and Netflix because these services consume more bandwidth compared to a normal website. Basically, these ISPs want to share in the money that YouTube or Netflix make. Without net neutrality, the internet as we know it will not exist. Instead of free access, there could be a plans for consumers. For example, if you pay rupees 500, you will be able to access website based in India. To access international websites, you may have to pay a more, or maybe there can be different connection speed for different type of content depending on how much you are paying for the service and what add-on package you have bought. Lack of net neutrality will also spell doom for innovation on the web, because innovation makes n number of net entrepreneurs. If you see the interesting cases of Flipkart, if you talk about the Snapdeal, everything, they must not have flourished like this what we are seeing now. It is possible that ISPs will charge web companies to enable faster access to their website. Suppose if there is a lack of net neutrality, it will make the innovations doomed. That is, it is possible that ISPs will charge more the web companies to enable faster access to their websites. Those who are not paying, they may not be having that much fast access. Those who don't pay may see that their websites will open very slow. This means bigger companies like Google will be able to pay more to make access to YouTube or Google Plus faster for the web users, but a startup organization or a small organization which is cropping into the internet, right, may take a long time and they will be charging extra to have a faster access, and moreover they may not be able to compete with the market leaders in the respective field. Instead, of an open and free internet. Without net neutrality, we are likely to get a web that has silos in it. And to enter each silo, you will have to pay a tax to ISPs. So it creates one interesting point that why this telecom organizations or telecom companies want to interfere, why they are showing an aggressive interest. If you must have watched a lot of TV programs, you must have seen a n number of discussions on this topic and lot of aggressive discussions which were going on. Lot of pros and cons were discussed upon. Why? Profit. Profit and corporate interest a telecom company is having at the backside. Companies might want to interfere with speech that makes them look bad, block applications that compete with their own, or increase their profit by forcing developers to pay more to avoid having their data blocked or slowed down. This makes the telecoms to interfere and they may go against the internet. So, when we talk about these proposals of the various telecom companies and other things, right, we will be understanding the basic motive of the telecom operators and Telephone Regulatory Authority of India, and presently the government of India, which has stepped into part, and Mr. President of USA also has stepped in, which we will be discussing in the coming part. So, what is the state now? If I talk about the net neutrality in India as well as in international part, if you talk about this, the Federal Communications Commission (FCC) recently adopted strong net neutrality rules that makes the policies and the rules which prevents the cable and phone companies from creating fast and slow lanes on the internet. But policymakers in the other parts of the world, particularly in Europe and India, are considering very different kinds of rules that could hurt consumers and startup internet businesses. Recently, the European Council, which is made up of 28 national governments of European Union members, adopted a proposal that would allow telecommunication companies to charge internet business like Netflix and Google fees to deliver their videos and other content to users faster than could smaller companies that cannot afford to pay for preferential treatment. In India, the country's telecommunications regulator asked for comments on whether it should adopt a provision similar to what Europe is considering. The regulator also asked if telecom companies should be able to charge users extra fees for services like YouTube, WhatsApp, and Skype on top of the fees people already pay for access to the internet. This is an add-on to that part. These proposals would hurt consumers because access to some services would cost more money. They would also hurt smaller internet businesses that could not afford to pay fees to get preferential access. By contrast, the FCC adopted rules in February 2015 that prohibits deals for better delivery and also forbids telecom companies from blocking or slowing down content. In Europe and India, proponents of weak net neutrality rules appear to have bought into the misguided notion that higher charges are necessary to keep telecom companies in business, and further that the companies have a right to impose them. The idea goes something like this. Internet companies like Google and Facebook are making lots of money because cable and phone companies have built networks that give people access to their services. Therefore, internet-based businesses should help pay the cost of creating, maintaining, and upgrading networks. This is disingenuous argument. Telecom companies make money by charging individuals and businesses monthly fees for access to the network. If that revenue was inadequate to cover the cost of running networks, telecom companies would raise prices or they would become insolvent. If anything, Prices have fallen as it has become cheaper to provide services. This is what the trend we are looking and we are seeing it. Big telecom companies like Vodafone, which does business in Europe and India, are in fact quite profitable. So, after having a look at the view and the visions of the telecom companies and the pressure by telecom companies on this net neutrality, will the concept of net neutrality survive? As of 2015, India had no laws governing net neutrality, and there have been violations of net neutrality principles by some service providers. While the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India tried, guidelines for the Unified Access Service promote net neutrality. They are not enforced. The IT Act 2000 not prohibit companies from throttling their service in accordance with their business interest. In March 2015, the Telephone Regulatory Authority of India released a formal consultation paper on regulatory framework for over-the-top services. Over-the-top services, it's a very top, that means internet is a base and whatever the services you are providing it over that, either you have the e-commerce companies or anything, they have to pay extra for that service. This they have put forward into the regulatory framework for the over-the-top services. The consultation paper was criticized for being one-sided and having confusing statements. It was condemned by various politicians and internet users. Recently, 24th April 2015, over a million emails had been sent to Telephone Regulatory Authority of India demanding net neutrality. And there are a lot of negative criticism against the Telephone Regulatory Authority of India documents related to that part, especially over the top service, OTT. Recently, Mr. President of US came in support of net neutrality, urging the Federal Communications Commission (FCC) to implement the strongest possible rules to protect net neutrality and ensure that neither the cable company nor the phone company will be able to act as a gatekeeper, restricting what you can do or see online. He added, we cannot allow internet service providers to restrict the best access or pick winners and losers in the online marketplaces for services and ideas. Some of the rules suggested by Mr. President of US includes no blocking. If a consumer requests access to a website or a service, ISPs, that is internet service providers, should not be permitted to block it, enabling every player gets a fair shot at your business. No throttling. ISPs should not intentionally slow down some content or speed up others based on the type of service or their preferences. Increased transparency. The connection between consumers and ISP is not the only place some sites might get special treatment. Hence, if necessary, FCC, Federal Communications Commission, should apply net neutrality rules to points of interconnection between the ISP and the rise of internet. No paid priority. No service should be struck in a slow lane because it does not pay a fee. Mr. President asked for an explicit ban on paid priority and any other restrictions that has a similar effect. Mr. President mentioned that FCC should make these rules fully applicable to mobile broadband as well, due to increasing adoptions of mobile devices to access the internet. This is what we are seeing, it's the trend in India also. He also asked FCC to reclassify consumer broadband service as a public utility. Net neutrality is a sort of gentleman's agreement. It has survived so far because few people realized the potential of internet when it took off around 30 years ago. But now, when the internet is an integral part of society and incredibly important, ISPs, internet service providers across the world are trying to get the power to shape and control the traffic. But there are ways to keep net neutrality alive. Consumers should demand that ISPs continue their hands-off approach from the internet traffic. If consumers see a violation of net neutrality, they ought to take a proactive approach and register their displeasure with the ISP. They should also reward ISPs that uphold the net neutrality. So, the present views and the discussions which we talked today, which gives a basics into the net neutrality, and it gives a orientation or gives a way to understand what is this net neutrality signifies. In the coming days, we will be very clear about the role of Telephone Regulatory Authority of India and the relevance and importance how it has been kept intact by the political parties and the technicians, technocrats of all over the world. So let us watch and see how the net neutrality get its progress and get its shape, and each and everybody in the net that we call netizens have a equal treatment and an equal access and a neutral approach. Let us see. Thank you.